Okay, so let's get started. Last week we were speaking about some of the different halachos, the laws related to the month of Adar, which is really Adar Bays or the second Adar this year. But we finished up saying that there was different halachos about the different things, the different parshas that we would read, the different portions we would read um at the end of the weekly portion, Shkalim, and Para. Um, Chodesh, Zachor, and about the fast there, and then also we spoke about the minhag to give a half a shekel. That's done all before Purim. But this week we're going to get started about the laws, the halachos that are on the actual day of Purim itself. Um, so we'll see. We'll do what we can. But I think on the agenda for tonight will be to talk about how many, on which day to celebrate Purim, because that's not always so obvious depending on where you are in the world. And then we'll talk about who is obligated in some of these halachos in Purim, men, women, children. And then we'll get into the specific actual mitzvos that we have on Purim itself. Like, for example, giving money to the poor, matanos avionim, or mishalach manos, to give gifts to a friend, and the suda, the meal Purim. I don't know if we'll get through all of that tonight, but we'll get through what we can. But that's basically the agenda. So number one, first we'll talk about how many days, which day to celebrate Purim. So when the rabbis established the holiday of Purim, they said that any city that had a wall during the times of Yehoshua, during the times of Joshua, should celebrate Purim on the 15th of Adar. But every other city should celebrate Purim on the 14th of Adar. And the question is why? Why would you separate? Why would you make it different? That one day, we don't have that for other holidays usually. That usually we celebrate on the same day. So the answer is that during the times of Esther and Mordechai, the story of Purim, so the Jews in all places, in Ahasuerus' kingdom, they all fought their enemies on the 13th of Adar. That's when they went out and fought. And then the next day, which was the 14th, they stopped fighting. They made a party. Everyone was very happy and they celebrated. But in Shushan, which is where most of the story of Purim takes place, in Shushan, they extended the fighting by one day. So they didn't just fight on the 13th of Adar, they also fought on the 14th of Adar. And so they didn't stop fighting and start celebrating until the 15th. So it was really split. So therefore, when they wanted to establish this holiday of Purim for generations to come, they decided to also split the holidays into 2 days. And really, they decided that it should be that any city with a wall that was similar to the wall that Shushan had around its city, which meaning it had a wall during the days of Achashverosh, that they should also celebrate Purim on the 15th. But Chazal understood that since the land of Israel was destroyed during that time, and none of the cities in Israel had their walls, Chazal didn't want that the cities which were outside Israel to be more important than the cities in Israel. So in order to give honor to the land of Israel, they declared that any city with a wall during the times of Yehoshua, even though that's not when the story of Purim took place, but during the times of Yehoshua, that if they had a wall there, they should make Purim on the 15th, and then and do nothing on the 14th, right? Rest on the 14th and celebrate Purim on the 15th. You need a wall during the times of Yehoshua. This is besides for Shushan, of course, because even though they did not have a wall during the times of Yehoshua, they would also celebrate on the 15th because that is, of course, where the miracle happened. So that would mean most cities would celebrate the 14th. There are some Mishnayos, if you read through Megillah, not the Megillah, the Gemara Megillah, they talk about different days when somebody would read Megillah. Um, but nowadays we have a calendar, and everyone knows when the 14th of Adar is. So basically, pretty much everyone reads on the 14th, besides people in Jerusalem and Jerusalem. But just to go back to walled cities, for example, how do we determine what a walled city is? So it doesn't necessarily need to be in Israel. It just needs to again have had a wall during the times of Yeshua. And even if it doesn't have a wall right now, as long as it had a wall during those days. But there are some further conditions, which is that it needs to have been built with a wall. The city needs to, or people could have lived there without a wall, but the city was built on the condition that there was going to be a wall. Um, so that's a big limitation. Um, and let's say you have a city that you're not sure that if it had a wall during the times of Yeshua, you don't know. So some people say that you should be very stringent and keep 2 days of Purim in that event, and read Megillah on both days, and to do all the mitzvahs of Purim on both days. Um, there the cities that people I saw an article online, um, cities that people have questioned that maybe they have walls or they had walls during the times of of Yeshua. Besides for Jerusalem, Jerusalem, pretty much everyone agrees that they celebrate on the 15th. But in addition to Jerusalem, what other cities are people questioned about? Tiberia, I think some people in Tiberia will keep 2 days. Hebron, Tzfat, Akko, those are the ones that are in Israel, in addition to Jerusalem. And then there are some other cities around the world that some people have questioned that perhaps they should be celebrating on the 15th, which is if you're in Susa, Iran, I don't know if I'm saying that right, or Baghdad, Iraq, Provence, France, Tyre in Lebanon, and Saloniki, Greece. So if you're there for Purim, then maybe ask a rabbi what you should do. But if you're not there for Purim, I think you're safe pretty much to celebrating on the 14th. But the question that comes up, which is relevant though, is what if you live in Yerushalayim, which is I don't think any of us on the call live in Yerushalayim, but what if you're traveling to Yerushalayim on Purim? Like for me, or myself when I was in yeshiva for the year, I went to yeshiva in Yerushalayim in the old city. So would I celebrate on the 14th or would I celebrate on the 15th? Because I wouldn't necessarily call myself a resident, but I was in Jerusalem at the time. I happened to be there for an extended period. So what would be the halacha there? So first of all, if you live outside Jerusalem, like let's say you live in America, you didn't live in a walled city, then you can't fulfill your obligation of Megillah, appearing in Megillah on the 15th. If you weren't able to hear it on the 14th for whatever reason, then you can read on the 15th, but you wouldn't be able to make a bracha. Um, if you're also a someone who lives outside Yerushalayim, we're going to define these people by someone who doesn't live in Yerushalayim and someone who lives in Yerushalayim, just to make it less complicated. American and Yerushalayim to make it simple. So the American person, so he also can't go to Yerushalayim and read the Megillah for the people of Yerushalayim, since he's not obligated on the 15th, right? His obligation is the 14th. Would be able to read it for them and be moti them, make them fulfill their obligation. But if you reverse the roles, someone who lives in Yerushalayim, so most people say that if you read it on the 14th, you actually would fulfill it. You would fulfill it if you do it. Some argue, some say only if you did it accidentally, not if you did it on purpose. But that there is that distinction. But anyways, let's get back to traveling. So this is the halacha that if you're planning on traveling and staying in the city for both days the entire time, then you become a citizen of wherever it is you're going. So if I live in Yerushalayim and I'm going to be in America for Purim, what do? I celebrate Purim on the 14th. If I'm American, I live in Washington D.C., live in New York, and I happen to be in Yerushalayim for a week or for a few months, and I'm going to be in Yerushalayim for Purim. When do I celebrate? I celebrate the 15th. If I'm going to be there, as long as I'm there on the 14th and I'm there on the 15th. Let's say, let's say you live in Israel, right? And let's say you live in Tel Aviv, and you're going to you you're going to planning on being in Yerushalayim for a little bit, at least on the 14th or the 15th. What would be the halacha there? So if your plan is to return to your home, right, in either situation, then you read on the correct date for your city. Meaning, if I'm from Tel Aviv and I'm planning on going to Yerushalayim, but I could be back in Tel Aviv on the 14th, then I would read on the 14th, right? And the reverse would be true for someone who's from Yerushalayim. Let's say you forgot to do it. Let's say your planning was return. Your plan was to return. You never returned, or you forgot to read. So that is a lot of people argue about that. So you should ask the rabbi. If you do that, you should try to avoid it though, and make sure that you know what you're doing in advance of Purim. If you are in near Yerushalayim or planning on going to Yerushalayim on Purim, let's say you're in a desert or you're on a boat, right? And so you're not in a walled city, you're not in a non-walled city. So what should you do there? So so if that was the case, if you were in a desert, you're on a boat, plane, or then you should celebrate Purim on the 14th, like most of the world celebrates it, and that's true even if you're someone who lives in Yerushalayim. Say, let's say I'm someone in Yerushalayim, I always celebrate on the 15th. This year, I happen to be on a boat for I'm on a cruise for 2 weeks, right? So I'm not in Yerushalayim, but that's where I live, and I'm not in a walled city or non-walled city. So you still celebrate on the 14th. If you can't get to McGill until the 15th, then you could read on the 15th. There's an interesting halacha that comes when the 15th of Purim, sorry, the 15th of Adar falls out on Shabbos, and you live in Yerushalayim, and that's what's called a Purim Mishulash, the threefold Purim. If that happens, then you have to figure out all the different halachas there. But we're not going to get into that. But okay. So that's the days. That's really the days of Purim. Any questions there? Basically, for us, we celebrate the 14th. That's a lot of halachas to
Okay, I
follow.
got a question. Yeah, what if you fly over Jerusalem? Or let's say you're reading it on Zoom. Can you read it on Zoom from Jerusalem for somebody who's not in Jerusalem? Or for somebody outside of Jerusalem, for people in Jerusalem?
Wait, yeah. So I mean, if you're flying, right, that's probably the same case as if you're in a desert or on a boat. So that would probably go by the
No,
14th.
if you're flying over Jerusalem,
But you're not in Jerusalem.
why we say the holiness goes up forever.
Yeah, I mean, also I don't know how if you're in how
A
long are you on the
helicopter.
plane for?
Let's say you're in a helicopter. You're doing the
The whole
Shmirah.
day. Yeah.
You're doing
Oh
Shmirah,
yeah. So
the
maybe some of
helicopter.
these chayalim they would have to ask these questions.
Well,
Um,
you said Baghdad. There's, Shaul Weinreb. He was in Baghdad. He was serving in the U.S. Army. He was in Baghdad.
right. So you could if you are aware of it, you could come up with situations where you might have to read on the 15th. Um, but for most people, most of us, I don't think that's going to be relevant. If it does come up, you got to talk to you got to shoot it up the ladder. Um, okay. So now let's talk
Okay.
about
I have a
who are.
question, Roey.
Oh yeah,
If you're, is the requirement is that you live within the walled city, or I mean, some cities like Jerusalem has many places that residents that live outside the walled city. Uh, so do you have to reside within the wall of the walled city in order
yeah.
to
On the 15th.
That's a
to
good question. I don't know. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I don't know how they define the city of Jerusalem. if it's just by the actual walls of the old city or the actual city of, the full city of
Mhm.
Jerusalem itself, according to, Israel's definition of a city. I'm not
Mhm.
sure.
Isn't it fair to say that, I know that King David's, the first temple was outside the walls that the Muslims built. So if you're outside the walls that we see, you could be in the first temple area. So, so what if you're in the first temple area back to Joshua, right? It seems to me you should have a broader geographic border than
Right,
Muslim walls.
right. That's a good point. I will just add that the city doesn't need to have walls right now for you to read on the 15th. It just needs to have had walls during the times of Joshua. But I don't know. I still am not sure how, like nowadays, what are the actual borders that people draw around Jerusalem to say these were the walls during the times of Joshua? Because it doesn't matter if there's a wall right now or if there's no wall, if there is a wall.
But don't you think, I mean, I'm just guessing here, the people who live in Jerusalem, the German colony and all that, they would celebrate it on the 15th. Don't you think that's my guess? But that seems to me.
Yeah, I would guess so. I would think so, but okay, yeah, okay, good, very interesting. And if you go to Jerusalem, you gotta make sure to ask these questions. Um, but now next discussion is who who are let's talk about women and children to see if they're what they are obligated and what they're not obligated. Normally the rule is that anytime we have a time bound mitzvah, time bound commandment, mitzvah asay shad mangrama, a positive mitzvah that is dependent on time, we usually say women are not obligated to do it, which is why women are not obligated, for example, to put on tefillin. Um, but so that would seem to imply that the mitzvahs of Purim, since they're all time bound to the calendar, then women should not be obligated in any of the mitzvahs of Purim. However, we say they are obligated in the mitzvahs of Purim because the phrase is Afhin Hayu Beoselanis. They were involved in the miracle, meaning the decree to kill all the Jews during the times of Mordechai and Esther also applied to them. So the miracle was also performed on them that they were saved to. Therefore, women should hear the Megillah. Mishnah Berurah says that if they can't get to shul for various reasons, then they can hear the Megillah outside of shul. But there is an interesting point that comes up is that if a man is reading, let's say a man went to shul, and then he comes back, and his wife didn't go to shul, and so his wife needs to still hear the Megillah, so he's going to read the Megillah for her. But he already fulfilled his obligation, so he should actually change the bracha. That's what they say. He should change the bracha. That normally the bracha that is recited in shul is al mikra Megillah, on reading the Megillah. But if it's just for a woman to if the woman's the only one who's actually fulfilling her obligation, change the bracha and say lishmoa mikra Megillah, to hear the Megillah being read, because some say that a woman's obligation is in listening to the Megillah and not reading the Megillah. So that's an interesting point. Women can fulfill obligations for other women, but of course, if there's nobody around, the woman doesn't know how to read the Megillah. She should just read it on her own. If that's what her option is, and women have to still give matanos lavionim, gifts to the poor people, which we'll discuss after, and they have to give mishloach manav also. The Magen Avraham, the commentary on the side of the Shulchan Aruch, he says that he actually never saw women who were careful to send mishloach manos. So he said it must be that their husband um, did it on the behalf of their wives. But it says at the end of the day, it's better to be stringent about this. Women should send, men should send. There's also discussion that people say that men should send to men and women should send to women, but men should not send to women. The reason that they give is because perhaps by giving a gift to a woman, it's in a way like you're giving a kiddushin marrying the woman. So that's why they say men should not give to women. Um, but if a but for a man to give to women tzedakah for Matanos Avionim, they don't think that's a problem because that's done through tzedakah, through charity, not through giving gifts. And of course, well, they say they are also obligated in the seuda, the meal of Purim. So that's in regard to women. In regard to children, there's a, there's a extra minhag. People are extra careful to make sure to bring their children to hear the Megillah. So most people say that that's for chinuch, that's for educating purposes, to educate the children. And then that would mean that you'd only bring a child if you reached appropriate age. But some say actually that it's not just for education, but it's also for parsumei nisa, for spreading the miracle. And then you would bring your child even if they hadn't reached the appropriate age and they didn't even understand it. You should make sure in the sefer that I was reading there, they said that, a lot of times the kids come and they all they do know is to boo Haman. So he said you should make sure people know that they tell their children that they're also coming to hear the Megillah, not just to boo Haman. I think it's really one the same, that the reason they're booing Haman is because they're listening to the Megillah. But that they made an interesting point about that in the sefer that I was reading. And then some say that a child can actually fulfill the obligation for a gadol, for an adult in Megillah, since the adult obligation is only a rabbinical obligation. Others disagree, and we usually try to avoid it. But if it's necessary, it may be allowed. This will be our last discussion for this evening. Will be matanos avionim, giving gifts to the poor. So this is a mitzvah that you do on Purim. That a person is obligated to give gifts to two different poor people. One gift to each poor person. And many achronim, later rabbis, they say that even a poor person is obligated in this mitzvah, that even if you're poor, you still need to give gifts to two other poor people. So Mishnah Berurah writes that if the person is super poor, then you could actually give a small amount of money to two other poor people, and the poor people will return the money to you. And that way you fulfill your obligation. You fulfill your obligation with with just giving to two different people, but the more you give, the better. And the Rambam writes in the Mishnah Berurah quote this is, I think, an important point for people to remember as you get into your Purim, that you're right that it's better to give more, to spend more on the gifts that you give to the poor, on the tzedakah that you give, than to have a nicer per suda, per meal, or to have nicer mishlalach manos, nicer gifts that you send to your friend. He said more important to give more money for tzedakah, matanos avionim, because there's no greater joy than making people who are poor, or the widows, or orphans, making them happy. And anyone who makes these individuals happy, it's actually compared to the Shekhinah dwelling. So that's an important point from the Rambam. There's another discussion: can you use your meiser? That some people are very careful to give 10% of all their earnings to give it as tzedakah. So would you be able to use your meiser, your 10%, and give that as your matanos avionim? So most people say you should. The baseline obligation, which is to give small amount of money to two poor people, should not be from these funds, but anything extra that you give can be. Then the ideal is to give the poor person something which he can benefit from on Purim itself, meaning either food. You could give food if you want, or money that the person can use. That a check, I guess, you can't use right away. So the ideal would be to give them something that they can use immediately. And what is the amount? So this is very surprising. I thought that I would find it very easy to find the amount like what are the different ranges? Like, do I give $1, $10, $5? But it's actually most people don't even comment on it, the actual amount. So that took me some time to find what people say, because they say that really you can fulfill with uh, anything of value, and I guess that because money changes, um, you know, the amount of what something of value um, actually changes depending on time and inflation. So that's why I guess why many don't want to actually give them an amount. But people say that they should give an amount that somebody can purchase something with, an amount that a person thinks is important. Some have been quoted to say $1. Others say that it should be the equivalent amount of the cost of a meal for a poor person. That could be $5 or $10. So you should give what you think is appropriate. And again, the more you give, the better. But an important point to remember is that you shouldn't that this money that you give for tzedakah should not be given to a poor person before Purim. That if you give it before Purim, then perhaps it'll be gone on the day of Purim, and then you're not going to have to fulfill your obligation on Purim itself. But the Aruch HaShulchan, he writes that you can give money, and this is, I think, probably very common practice, that you can give money to someone who then will distribute it on Purim, right? That then you would fulfill your obligation because your money is still being distributed on Purim, so poor people are going to be benefiting from it on Purim, but you're able to do that in advance. And I think that's very common, and many people do that. And then we'll just close with this, that on Purim, the halacha is we don't check too closely. Sometimes when we're giving tzedakah, we want to make sure that the person that we're giving to is indeed someone who needs it, is indeed someone who's poor. The halacha on Purim is that you don't check so closely, that really whoever asks from you is you give, and you trust them, that whoever says they need something, you give them, no questions asked. And that's halacha on Purim. And just something interesting that I thought of, that the Gemara says in Ktuvos, that it's actually because of these like different liars and different cheaters that we're actually exempt from not always giving somebody tzedakah. That really the halacha is that the pasuk says that if a poor person stretches their hand and asks for money, asks for help from you, you need to help them out. You're not allowed to turn away from them. It's only because of these people who lie about it are we then exempt if we don't give. Because if we really knew that person was poor and really needed this money and was going to use it appropriately, then we would have to give them money. Of course, not all our money, a reasonable amount, but we have to give them something. And the Gemara also in Bava Kama says that Yirmiyahu, he davens to God, and he says that even when a Jew wants to give tzedakah, says please make them give to people who don't deserve it. So Yirmiyahu says, that's the Gemara quote, which is very strange. Why is his request that they give to people who don't deserve it? So the Gemara, the idea is that if you give to people who don't deserve, then God looks at you and says, it might be you don't deserve for me to judge you favorably or to give you what you need, right? But you're giving to people who don't deserve, so I'll give you even though you don't deserve. And then maybe that's one idea that we can have as we go into Purim and give this money to people who need it. Matanu Sayyoli on Purim is that if we give to people who don't deserve, God should look at us and give us even stuff that we don't deserve. Okay, so we'll stop there. And next week we'll continue.